Old Timer here with part 2, chapter 2, and a little story about the last Barefoot generation. From when I was about 11 up to when I graduated from high school, I passed many long summer days with some other boys that lived around me. Some were my cousins. There was little Fred. He died at 30 with kidney failure. And Peter Jack, he got drafted a year before because I was going to be, he was a year older than me, and he got drafted a year before I would be drafted. Then somehow, right after he finished boot camp, Army boot camp, and the night before he was to come home on leave before being sent to Korea, it was the Korean War, he was out in a car with some of his Army buddies, and they ran into a tree, and Peter Jack got killed. Then there was Hammer. His name was James, but everybody called him Hammer. He quit school and learned how to operate a drag line and worked at that most of his life before I think they said drinking beer killed him in his 60s. Clyde was a little younger, and he was a kind of a comedian, but you could tell he was smart because he taught himself how to play guitar, and there was nobody around that could play a guitar. Sometimes while I was away in the military or at college, they say he started having terrible headaches and finally died, and when the doctors examined him, they said it was a brain tumor that killed him. Tommy, he went into service with me and froze to death in Korea when he was 19 and a half years old. We went down to the big city, and we were in the same line going up the steps into the building where you signed up. And I asked him 2 or 3 times to go in the Navy with me, but he said he wanted to get the tough Marine training because when he got out, he was going to be a boxer. What is luck? You never know. Joseph, we called him Josie, was exactly my age to 5 days, and we lived not far from each other and grew up as close friends. We went to different schools because Josie was black, and I need to tell you about that kind of thing a little later. Anyway, Josie stayed on when he grew up where we lived, and he worked on a railroad section gang until he retired. I didn't see much of Joseph through the years because I only went through there 2 or 3 times after I got out of college. I went far away. Anyway, I did look him up when we were in our 70s, and I solemnly promised him that I would see him again in a year or 2 and that we'd go fishing. Sadly, I failed to live up to that promise, and he died of cancer a few days before our 79th birthdays. As time has passed, I've slowly realized that every person that really knew me from childhood to my late teens are gone. All the people that lived around me and knew me on a first-name basis as a child and a teenager, they are all gone. All I have now is a very small number of wonderful family, and none of them knew me when I was a young man. Like I said before, I grew up in the Southeastern Atlantic Coastal Area where there were lots of rivers and creeks off those rivers. All the rainwater from back up the country eventually made it down to those creeks and the river into the Atlantic Ocean. As early teenagers, my little group of neighborhood boys did all kinds of things. Even though it was a little difference and our age was 2 or 3 years apart, we all learned to swim the same summer. We went in, there was a small creek across the house, across the road, from where my grandma's house was, and we'd go down there through a little patch of woods to the creek, and that's where we all practiced swimming. we knew not to go in when the water was way up, because we had marked a line on the bank, and whenever the water dropped down, we could see that line when we marked. We knew that it wasn't over our head, and it was all right for us to go in and practice swimming. We did that, and we all learned to swim, and there was never a problem of anyone drowning. All us boys went in naked all the time. We played gator, where one was the gator and tried to catch one of the others, and if he did, that one became the gator. We also took sides and threw clay balls at each other like dodgeball. A little story about something that happened one summer day. All us boys were in the swimming hole. There was a small oak tree that had been uprooted by the water because it was right at the edge, and it had fallen across the creek from the roots on my grandma's side over to the bank on the other side of the creek, and the top of the tree had lodged on the other bank, and that bank was higher than the bank where on the side we went to the creek on my grandma's house side. Anyway, we got in the habit of climbing up and walking over there, and the uprooted part of the tree, it still had mud and grass and weeds 4 or 5 inches tall growing on it. Anyway, we'd walk up there to it and put our hand up on it, on the trunk of the tree, to steady ourselves. Then we'd jump off over to the big trunk of the tree and walk up where we could jump in the creek where it was deeper. Anyway, I went to do that one day, and I got there and put one hand up to my left hand. I put it up to steady myself, and time it touched, I realized I'd put my hand right down on a pile of coiled up snake. I jerked my hand back, it must have been the flash, and managed to jump far enough out in the creek that I landed in the water and didn't hurt myself, and the snake fell about the same time I did from the tree into the water about 5 feet away from me to my left downstream, and went swimming away. About the time it happened, none of the boys was looking directly at me and just heard me yell before they looked. So we couldn't tell if it was a very poisonous cottonmouth moccasin, which gets its name because when it opened the mouth, the inside of the mouth was white, or where it was just a water snake that looks just like the cottonmouth. Anyway, that experience made me really scared after the fact. As we grew older, we started using our parents' small rowboats and went up and down the creeks, and especially down the river that flowed into the nearby waterway. Anyway, there was a big waterway at the end of our river, and now I know it was called the Intercoastal Waterway. Anyway, around that area we learned to catch red bass, spot-tailed bass we called them, and sea trout, and sometimes striped bass that we called rockfish. We also learned how to pick the best oysters in the wintertime, and one Thanksgiving holiday, a bunch of us boys went down there and loaded 3 or 4 boats with oysters and went back and surprised our families and neighbors, and we all had a oyster roast that night, and it was a really fun time. Around the edges of the marsh, alligator mothers would build nests out of mud and marsh grass and lay eggs, a pile of eggs in them. And we knew that in the springtime that the little baby alligators would hatch out and start floating up and down in the creek. And that spring, little Fred, he was older than us, he was down at the service station one day, and a man came by talking about asking if he knew anybody that might catch him some baby alligators that he could buy from them. And he said he owned a tourist attraction on further south where northern tourists on their way to Florida would stop. Anyway, little Fred made a deal with him, and the man promised to come back in a few days. And so he come home and told us all about it, and that evening we all headed down to the river where we knew that nest was, and the little alligators were already hatching out. And anyway, we got there after dark. We had flat bottom rowboats, and we'd have one would paddle and another one would kneel down in the front of the boat. And we had these little headlights that you could put the strap around your head. We'd drift back in two, and the one in the front of the boat would shine the light, and whenever he picked up the eyes of a little gator, we'd slip up on him, and the one in the front of the boat would keep the light shining on him, and when he got close, he'd jerk down with his hand and grab the little gator back of the neck and throw him in the boat. We had to be careful because we knew the mama gator was always close by, and we didn't want the little gator to make any noise whenever we caught him, so we did it really fast. Anyway, that night we caught 24 gators, and we put them in two open bottom drums, 55-gallon drums, and we put 2 or 3 inches of water in them, and we learned that we could catch grasshoppers and throw in there, and them little gators would gobble them right up. Anyway, by the time the man came back, we had 42 baby gators, and we sold them to the man for $60. We made $10 a piece. The next year, when I graduated from high school, I paid for my class ring with money I got selling baby alligators. Our lives were near like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn from Mark Twain. You know his book, Huckleberry Finn and so forth, that was so popular years ago. From what has gone on since my time, though, I believe my bunch, the kids around me, I believe we lived the last of that kind of carefree, adventurous life. As they say, the river changes, but it flows onward, just as our lives do. Around where I grew up, nobody was looked at as rich or poor, even though some families had a lot more land than others did. Everybody did about the same thing: small gardening and farming and raising pigs and chickens and killing deer in the fall and winter and fishing for food. I did everything in order to live. And there was black folks and white folks up and down the road, and some with paths off the road that lived back away from the dirt road. Anyway, some of my mama's close friends was 3 ladies that lived around us, and my lady that was the what you call it when a kid is born was called Rosa, and Rosa was there when my mama had me and my younger sister, because her ex-signature is on my official birth certificate today. Rosa was a midwife. That was what I was trying to think of. I'm not saying that there wasn't segregation or discrimination going on, because there was. In the towns, the water fountain said whites only. And as a teenager, when I went to the bigger town, I could hear people saying that the blacks had to be kept in their place. But where I grew, there was never such a thing going on. Everybody was just people, and Joseph was my close friend, and I knew a lot of black kids, and we were on the first name basis. It was like everybody did the same thing, and everybody treated everybody with respect and so forth. If one person had fresh roasting ear corn, everybody was invited to come get some. And some person caught a lot of fish, he carried some of them around to the neighbors and things like that. It was share and share alike. We butchered hogs together and made sausage. They smoked the hams and the sausage in their smokehouses, and we smoked ours in ours. And my mom and sister sat on the front porch with Rosa and Etta and Hattie many summer days shelling black-eyed peas and beans and so forth. And I knew that the black people ate opossums. We called them possums, and they ate raccoons, which we call coons. We knew they ate them, but they said they were good, and that was all right with me. That's the end of the second segment. Thank you very much.